Next, the warning signs were there, but the cladding wasn't removed. It took 6 hours and more than 100 firefighters to put out a tower block fire in Wembley on Monday evening. 12 flats were destroyed, but nobody was injured. The local MP says for years he's raised concerns about the cladding and the need to remove it. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
A burning block of flats, homes destroyed, lives turned upside down, and yet again questions about cladding and building safety. The fire appears to have started on the upper floors of Petworth Court in Wembley. Titai, who lives opposite, was one of the first to dial 999.
We didn't know exactly what was going on because it was like, is this going to be like Grenfell? Is this going to be like, yeah, it was scary. And we're thinking, are we going to be evacuated? Are we going to suddenly see everything go up and in flames? Yeah, of course it was scary, yeah, definitely.
Daylight revealed the extent of the damage to the 5-storey block. Panels of cladding were missing and the charred timber frame bore testimony to the intensity of the inferno. 125 firefighters spent more than 5 hours trying to bring the blaze under control. 18 hours on, parts of the roof are still smouldering. Petworth Court was home to 12 families. Adjoining blocks in the same development had the same cladding. They were all evacuated. The area's MP said he repeatedly pressed the housing association, which owns them, to remove the cladding.
We know that the cladding on the outside of this building was similar to the cladding at Grenfell. I raised this with the management company repeatedly last year, challenged them on the fire safety defects of the building, and they simply still have not taken it off.
The housing association, Octavia, didn't respond directly to the MP's claims, but in a statement said, "The safety of our residents is our priority. Our thoughts are with everyone affected by the fire at Petworth Court, and we're glad to hear no injuries have been reported." Tenants of neighbouring buildings spent today waiting to see if they could go home. Emma needed to get his wallet.
We're just waiting, still now. No sleep, nothing.
How long have you been waiting here in the cold on the pavement?
Since yesterday, 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. It's almost 12 hours.
You must be very cold and very hungry.
Cold and hungry, yes.
The investigation into how the fire started was put on hold after a visit by structural engineers.
At the moment we've pumped a lot of water into the building and that causes a lot of weight on the upper floors. So at the moment it's been declared unsafe, so we cannot penetrate the building, so we'll be firefighting from the outside until some of that weight is dissipated, and then we will continue investigations.
No one was hurt in the fire. It could have been a lot worse, but tonight at least 12 families are without a home. Simon Harris, ITV News, Wembley.
Good evening. Sadiq Khan did work out a plan to help people with the cost and inconvenience of replacing cars, which fell foul of his newly expanded ultra-low emission zone, send it for scrap and receive some compensation. But new figures published by TfL show that less than half of those drivers who've applied have actually had their cars crushed and received the cash they expected. Meanwhile, the Transport Secretary and City Hall have agreed on another scheme for non-compliant cars, donating them to war-ravaged Ukraine. With the latest, here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
In the scrap trade, ULEZ has been good for business. Tens of thousands of cars and vans are destined for the crusher in return for a lump sum from the Mayor's scrappage fund. But there have been growing calls for some vehicles, especially 4x4s, to be donated to Ukraine for use on the front line.
Every day we receive lots of requests for vehicles, big or small, petrol, diesel, to be sent to Ukraine for humanitarian and medical purposes. Unfortunately, bombing happening every day and lots of cars are getting destroyed. And it's a big shame that, as present day, lots of roadworthy vehicles in London are being scrapped.
Sadiq Khan said he supported the idea but insisted his hands were tied by scrappage scheme rules which dictated that vehicles must be destroyed in the UK. City Hall Tories labelled his response as absurd. Now the Transport Secretary Mark Harper has written to the Mayor saying, "We do not consider there to be any legal barrier to allowing vehicles to be donated to Ukraine." The Mayor gave a cautious welcome on X, saying, "Encouraging news from the Transport Secretary. Let's keep working together to get this done." The Transport Secretary's intervention in the row over sending 4x4s to Ukraine came as new figures revealed just how many Londoners have been able to take advantage of the scrappage scheme. And that led to another row. Transport for London has received more than 115,000 applications for scrappage grants. So far, it's approved just 46,000, which means more than half, 68,000, haven't been processed or have been rejected.
We've seen from these figures that 70% of minibuses and vans are being rejected, over 50% of cars and motorcycles are being rejected, 75% of sole traders, small businesses being rejected, and over 71% of charities. It's beyond a joke.
What we can see is that we've accepted more than 46,000 applications, and those Londoners are now benefiting from the scheme.
But there are 68,000 applications which don't seem to have been processed yet.
So some of them, as you say, aren't processed yet. They're in the system. They are still being processed and working their way through.
TfL said it knows how many cars have been accepted for the scrappage scheme, but is unable to say how many have been rejected. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Next tonight, an MP who served his North London constituency for more than a decade will quit at the next general election after facing a string of death threats. Mike Freer narrowly avoided the killer of Southend West MP Sir David Amess, and his office was badly damaged in an arson attack. He even started wearing a stab vest at public meetings. The Finchley and Golders Green MP said enough was enough and the time had come to bow out of politics, as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
In Parliament, Mike Freer dresses for the job like any other MP. But away from the secure surroundings of Westminster, he's sometimes forced to wear a stab vest. His North London constituency has a large Jewish community, and his support for Israel has made him the target of abuse and threats.
When you get a constant string of incidents, some of them which threaten your life, there comes a point when you say enough is enough. And when our families feel the pressure, we really do have to evaluate whether we should continue. And for me, it was time to say, I need to do something else.
The final straw, it seems, was Christmas Eve, when Mr Freer's constituency office was set on fire in an alleged arson attack. He's been an MP since 2010. Not long after he was elected, he was threatened by an organisation called Muslims Against Crusades. And when Sir David Amess, the MP for Southend, was stabbed to death in 2021, it emerged his attacker, Ali Harbi Ali, a self-radicalised Islamist, had also targeted Mr Freer. In September 2021, a government reshuffle forced Mr Freer to cancel a meeting here at his constituency office. He didn't know it at the time, but that was an extraordinary stroke of luck, because Sir David's killer had been lurking outside, armed with a knife.
It could easily have been Mike Freer. We know that the person concerned had already tried to have that meeting with Mike Freer. So, you know, I understand Mike's concerns, I understand his partner saying enough is enough.
In the Commons, MPs on both sides described the threats to Mr Freer as an attack on democracy.
Such attacks on elected members are attacks on democracy itself. I know many members, honourable members and right honourable members, and their families are enduring such threats.
In 2015, Sarah Sackman was Mr Freer's Labour opponent and was looking forward to challenging him again in this year's general election.
This goes well beyond political differences. I was very much looking forward to having a proper debate, an exchange of ideas, and now that's not going to happen between myself and Mike because of the reasons of the threats that he has faced. That's completely unacceptable.
Mike Freer was re-elected in 2019 with a majority of 6,500. The seat is an important Labour target. The MP said standing down was an enormous wrench.
Well, Simon, it seems that safety concerns for politicians are becoming more and more common now.
Yes, People's Question Time is an event where Londoners get to question the Mayor and members of the London Assembly. It's normally held at venues around the capital, but the last one was moved to City Hall after ULEZ protesters disrupted the previous one. Well, now it seems that the security at City Hall wasn't good enough, because the next one, due later this month, isn't going to take place anywhere but online instead. City Hall said the unacceptable disruption put everyone at risk. Now, despite what happened to Mike Freer, some members of the London Assembly, Conservatives, were very unhappy at this. They accused Sadiq Khan of banning the people from People's Question Time and running scared of scrutiny.